Happy Friday! We're back. We're going to read a little bit more of Hugo Cabret. We are thankful, as always, to have permission from Scholastic Books to be reading this from my house to yours. I hope that you enjoy the next chapter. We're actually going to finish off the chapter that we started yesterday. There's about half of that left, and we'll do one more. So I'll back up just a bit. Well, maybe a ride to the police station will help out a little. Come on, boy, your limousine is waiting. The station inspector opened the cage, and Hugo saw his opportunity. Once again, he made a dash for it. He slipped between the police officers and ran back to the station. It was crowded today, and Hugo was bounced from person to person as they shuffled through the station. By the time he came into a clearing, he lost his sense of direction. He turned and saw the station inspector coming closer, with the two policemen right behind him. Hugo thought he saw Madame Emily and Monsieur Frick closing in quickly, too. He kept running and was knocked over by some travelers rushing to catch their train. He landed on his hand and screamed in pain. He managed to get back up, and then, with tears blurring his vision and desperately trying to reach the front doors of the station, he stumbled and ran in exactly the wrong direction. He tripped and fell several feet down onto the tracks. He looked up into the face of a train barreling into the station. From somewhere behind him, he thought he heard a scream. The horrible sound of the brakes being pulled, coupled with the metallic screech of the wheels against the rails, made it seem like the whole station was about to collapse around him. The black engine was zooming right toward Hugo, and he was caught, unable to look away, as though he were watching a movie. At the last possible moment, Hugo was yanked up off the tracks to safety. Smoke billowed out of the slowing engine as a shower of sparks flew from every wheel. Hugo felt dizzy. There were a few moments of dazed silence. Then steam was released from somewhere, and it made a sound like the train was sighing. For everyone on the train, nothing extraordinary had happened. They'd simply pulled into the station. But for Hugo, his entire world was ending. Again, the station inspector was holding his arm, his injured hand throbbing with pain. He could see the policemen removing handcuffs from their belts, and finally the pain and the terror grew too much. When Hugo opened his eyes, all he could see were stars and moons and what looked like a rocket ship. It was the cape from A Trip to the Moon, and George Méliès was wearing it. "Ah, welcome back, Hugo Cabret," he said, holding the boy's head in his lap on a bench in the station inspector's office. Standing behind Hugo was Isabel, leaning on her crutches. "Drink this," she said as she handed him a cup of water. "I knew something was wrong," she continued. "It was taking you much too long to come back. Papa George insisted on coming with me." The station inspector reached forward for Hugo, but the old man said in his most dramatic voice, "Take your hands off him." "I'm sorry, sir, but as I was saying earlier, this boy was caught stealing from the cafe and from the timekeeper, who had disappeared mysteriously. We believe he might be involved." Hugo saw that Madame Emily and Monsieur Frick had made their way into the office and were listening to everything. "Tell him what you know, Hugo," said George Méliès. Hugo gazed up into the eyes, which looked more gentle and welcoming than he'd ever seen them before. He whispered, "It's fine, Hugo. You're coming home with us. Now tell the station inspector what you know." Hugo looked up at the station inspector. "The timekeeper was my uncle, and I was his apprentice, but he was not kind, and he disappeared a while back, and I have to steal milk and croissants because I'm hungry, and I've been taking care of the clocks ever since, and now he's gone, and it will all be in the papers tomorrow." The station inspector studied Hugo, his eyebrows scowling. After what felt like an eternity, he unexpectedly started to laugh. The two policemen standing behind him looked confused. "You?" said the station inspector. "You've been keeping the clocks running in this entire station by yourself? A boy of 10? Ha! I'm 12, said Hugo. The station inspector continued to laugh. "Well, old man, your little friend here has quite a good imagination. Don't you think we would know if the timekeeper was dead?" "He is dead," said Madame Emily. "The boy is telling the truth." "I'll vouch for that," said Monsieur Frick. "But what was that thing you were stealing in the timekeeper's apartment?" "I wasn't stealing it," said Hugo, who looked up at the old man and said, "I dropped it. It's broken again." "I'm not worried about that. I think between the two of us we can have it fixed up pretty quickly." George Méliès turned to the station inspector. "You can't steal something that you already own, now can you?" That machine, hold on, Reed. That machine is his. We'll figure out how to repay you, madame, for the milk and the croissants, but now I think it's time for us to get out of this station. He helped Hugo stand. The children were enveloped by the soft folds of the old man's cape, and together they all headed home. Let's look at the pictures. Six months later. That is where we will catch up tomorrow. Have a great night.